Hey there, vinyl community. My name's Ross, and welcome to my channel, Just for the Record. And I wanted to give a shout out to Martin's Vinyl, who is over in the UK. And Martin recently started a thread regarding collectors who have multiple copies of one specific record. And the first album that came to my mind, and also the album I have the most copies of, is Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which came out in the summer of 1967. This is the current release, which is readily available for folks. They did a really nice job replicating the original UK Columbia label and cover. The only kind of silly thing is they reproduced this flipback style sleeve. However, they're not real flipbacks. It's just kind of a drawing of a flipback, but I guess it works. And it's on Pink Floyd records rather than EMI or Tower or Capitol. And this was issued during their reissue vinyl campaign back in 2006. This was actually my first copy. This is a Canadian 1980s era import. And that was on the Purple Capitol label. But I guess the reason I have so many copies, I have 16 copies, like I said. And I don't know, I just really connected to it as a teen. I had bought the Wall album early 1980. That's when I discovered it. And wanted to investigate more about the group. And the follow-up album that I bought after the Wall was actually their second record, The Saucer Full of Secrets, which came out in 68. And the interesting thing about these two albums is there's a transition in the lineup of the group. The original lineup featured Sid Barrett on vocal and guitar, Roger Waters on bass and vocals, Rick Wright, organ, piano, and vocals, and Nick Mason on drums. And three of them were Londoners who came from fairly British middle-class backgrounds. And there was Sid Barrett that came down from Cambridge. Roger, Rick, and Nick were architecture students at Regent Street College in London, where they had met. And they met up with Sid Barrett at a rooming house that I believe Roger had moved into around 1965, 66. And they eventually started the band, asked Sid to join them, and started out playing like R&B and blues covers and Rolling Stone covers, which a lot of mid-60s British bands did at the time. But gradually they kind of morphed into this psychedelic music. They started performing and became the headliners at the UFO Club, which was started by an American named Joe Boyd. Now, Joe Boyd would go on to produce Pink Floyd's first single, Arnold Lane, and then Joe would eventually leave and work for Island Records, where he produced many artists like Fairport Convention and Nick Drake and Sandy Denny and on and on. But the thing about Piper at the Gates of Dawn is it's really mostly Sid Barrett's album. And he had a very unique way of writing and playing guitar, and his lyrics were all like about gnomes and cats and mothers reading, good night stories to their kids with little psychedelic flourishes throughout. There's some instrumentals on here like Interstellar Overdrive, which more reflected how the Floyd sounded live at the UFO Club. They would play long, extended instrumental jams, and they built their reputation really around that. But by the time the Floyd were preparing to record singles and albums, first with Arnold Lane and then second single, See Emily Play, Sid really started writing more and more songs, which had to be structured, and the label was pushing them for the usual 2-minute, 3-minute singles, which the Floyd tried for a little while early on in their career, but eventually they became an albums band, and I guess the reason to have so many copies is so many different pressings, sound a little different. They have different labels and slightly different artwork on the covers. Like that. Sid actually designed that silhouette, which was taken from a photo of the band I discovered later, which the photo appears in a reissue of this album. The problem with Sid was he developed some mental health problems throughout 1967, and it just got progressively worse for him. By the time they came to America and did their first U.S. tour, which was primarily in the West Coast, Sid was not doing very well. Just became very difficult to communicate with, and just very strange. There's a scene or footage of them playing on the Pat Boone show at the time, and they're supposed to be miming to their third single, Apples and Oranges, and Sid is just standing there mute, not moving his mouth, or expressionless, just vacant, and the other guys just sort of have to take over and start miming for him, and the camera switched to Roger and Rick, to compensate for Sid's lack of functioning, more or less. But by the time they got back home to the UK, it was pretty clear that they had to figure out a way to cope with Sid's increasingly difficult behaviors and how to survive as a unit. By December 1967, they invited David Gilmour, who ironically was also from Cambridge and was a childhood friend of Sid's, which may have sort of helped ease him in to the group a little. The idea was to keep Sid on as a songwriter, but have David perform and do the shows with them. But it didn't take too long for that to kind of just fizzle out, and they more or less pushed Sid out, which I don't think anyone can blame them. I think that's significant of his mental health, and they're wanting to survive as a band and become successful. They had been signed to one of the top recording labels in the UK, and some would say the world, EMI. They were on the subsidiary label Columbia. So they had a lot going for them, and they had a lot of people behind them. that saw that they had talent and were really invested in them. But the Floyd didn't abandon Sid completely. They actually helped him out a couple years later in recording Sid's first solo record, Madcap Laughs. This came out in early 1970. And David Gilmour and Roger Waters kind of helped get this project completed and off the ground, and did their best to present this in the most commercial way they could. Sid had a second album as well, Barrett, later in 1970, which David Gilmour again helped produce, this time with Rick Wright. And the production on this is a little bit more polished and a little more structured, and I'm sure Rick and David did the best they could to kind of tidy everything up. They brought in Jerry Shirley, who played drums. He was later in the group Montrose, the British hard rock band. And Sid made a number of other recordings after Barrett. A lot of them showed up later in the 80s on this compilation. And it has a few outtakes from the other albums, and it's there's some real good tracks on here, and it's definitely worth having. I don't think it's as cohesive maybe as the other two albums. Sid had also done a Peel session on the BBC Radio 4 back in 1970 with, again, Jerry Shirley, David, and I guess it was just David Gilmour and Jerry Shirley that backed him up on the 4 cuts that are on here. They're basically cuts off the 2 albums. But there's been a lot of interest in Sid ever since he left the band, and certainly his presence in the group and influence on the group and their future projects really never ended. I mean, there's themes and references to Sid throughout Pink Floyd's career. From Brain Damage on Dark Side of the Moon to Shine On Your Crazy Diamond on Wish You Were Here, bits and pieces of The Wall have references to Sid and so forth. There have been a lot of unofficial releases as well. This has mostly early Pink Floyd BBC tracks and unreleased single, Scream Thy Last Scream and Vegetable Man, which are great tracks, which never saw the light of day until very recently. Were remixed and issued on a box set of Pink Floyd's early years. There's been tribute albums, and this is a really good one. This was 1987, and mostly British artists covering Sid's songs, but very nicely done. In America, we got this 2-record set, which combined Madcap Laughs and the Barrett album. And it's a nice gatefold package, and used to see this around a bit, but I rarely see copies of this for sale anymore. But this is the way that, we got the 2 albums in the U.S. The 2 Barrett albums. EMI and Capitol repackaged Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Saucer Full of Secrets. In this album, a nice pair. This is a UK copy. Actually, a second copy, as it has the picture of the monk rather than the dentist office, which photo got removed. I think the American version just has a sticker over it, but I don't have a American copy. So there's been a lot of, unofficial albums with Pink Floyd material. This is mostly material that showed up on More. This is a radio broadcast Floyd had done 69 in Europe, and it's called the Man Suite. But this has a great, Sid cover and nice package. Also, Relics was issued in the early 70s by EMI, and this had a lot of early Barrett songs and odds and ends on it as well. So the Floyd have really taken care to keep their early material in print and out there and available, which, over time has been really great for their fans. This was another European collection, and this is all of the singles with Sid, and although it's got a cover of David on the album, or a picture of David on the album, but nonetheless it has all the Sid singles in stereo on there. Let's see, this was a Canadian copy of Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and I like this because it's on the Capitol Rainbow label, which I think is a lot nicer looking than the Tower label we had in the States. So I've been, over the years I've been able to collect different versions of it. This was an 80s Japanese pressing, and this is really a fantastic sounding cut of this album. It also adds CM Lee Play on at the end of it, which the Americans should have done that. I don't know why Capitol or Tower chose to truncate Piper at the Gates of Dawn, but they did. They took off 3 songs to add CM Lee Play onto it, and they could have just added CM Lee Play onto the full album. This was a second label, Tower label, for the US edition. Let's see. I have original UK mono. I added the mono onto the bag. I didn't write on the cover. But yeah, so this is original Columbia UK. It took me years and years to find a nice mono copy of that. Certainly the internet and eBay and Discogs have made a lot of things possible that we didn't have available to us back in the 80s or even 90s. This was a 1987 mono reissue of Piper from the UK, and it came in a very nice gatefold sleeve. And a unique label. They also reissued the mono version 2017, I think, in this really nice package, which unfolds. And, they did a nice job replicating the cover again. This time it had a gold label. And they sold this individually afterwards, after Record Store Day as well, which I think is still readily available. And that's the one you really want. the other, the 1987 gatefold version wasn't mastered all that great, but the current one, or this one, is awesome. And this is the photo that Sid used to draw the silhouette for the back cover. And I never was aware of that until this package came out. So I've always thought that was pretty cool. So I'm not going to show you every single copy I have, but this is obviously a very important record to me, one that I'm very attached to and fond of, and have felt the need to collect different versions of over the years. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. I hope to continue and do some more Floyd in the future videos, and take care. We'll see you later.